think of the politics of zoning? Do you think we're likely to have a repeat of what happened in 2015 when Senator Bukola Saraki emerged at the Senate and Honorable Yakubu Dogara emerged as Speaker of the House of Representatives against the run of play, as we could say, for example? Or do you think that it will be fair to have in the leadership of the National Assembly Muslims, despite the fact that we already have a Muslim elected president, a vice president who is also Muslim elect? These two issues.
Well, what happened in 2015, the emergence of Dr. Bukola Saraki, did not offend the zoning arrangements that we have had, because he was from the North Central. The president, who is still president today, was from the Northwest. So his emergence just offended the expectations of the APC. And like you rightly put it, it was against the run of play. But it didn't offend the zoning arrangement, because he came from the zone that ordinarily should have produced the Senate president at that time. It is just that, let me put it another way. He came from a zone that was eligible to produce the Senate president at that time. It's just that he was not the preferred choice of his political party. So having said so, let me say that there are three perspectives to this issue. The first is the Constitution. The second is history. The third is precedent. And if you permit me, let me read directly from the Constitution, because I want to quote it verbatim. If you permit me, I'll do so right away. Section 14 of the 1999 Constitution says in subsection 1, the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be a state based on the principle of democracy and social justice. 2, it is hereby accordingly declared, blah, 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 but the crucial one is subsection 3. The composition of the government of the Federation or any of its agencies and the conduct of its affairs shall be carried out in such a manner as to reflect the federal character of Nigeria and the need to promote national unity and also to command national loyalty, thereby ensuring that there shall be no predominance of persons from a few states or from a few ethnic or other sectional groups in the government or in any of its agencies. Now, the principle enunciated in section 14.3 is an elevated principle of inclusiveness, of social justice, of equity. Now, I was in the field. Like I said, I was secretary of the Campaign Planning Directorate for the Presidential Planning Committee. I was out there in the field. And one of the major issues we had to contend with was the issue of the same-faith ticket of our presidential candidate then and the vice presidential candidate. It was a major issue for us Christians. It was a major issue for us Southerners. Now, we have just survived one anxiety. By the grace of God, we won. We have just survived one anxiety. We should not willingly or unwittingly create another anxiety. We might not survive it, might consume us. The Constitution is very, very clear. It must be inclusive. Every section, ethnic, religious, must be accommodated in the governance of this country. in the opportunities and resources of this country. Having said so, we have a Muslim president-elect from the south, a Muslim president-elect from the northeast. I have given a little background of the Constitution. So let me go a bit into history. This current democracy, I used to refer to it as episodes because we used to expect military interventions every now and then. But I think this has come to stay. It's no longer an episode. So I will refer to it as this democracy. Started in 1999. President Olusegun Obasanjo from the southwest was first elected. The Senate presidents, and they came in very quick succession, if you recall, were all from the southeast. From Senator Evans Enwerem to Senator Chuba Okadibo, to Senator Ayim Pius Ayim, to Senator Adolphus Wabara, to Senator Ken Nnamani. It was never an issue how many of them from the southeast became Senate presidents. In fact, at a point I joked to late Senator Aton Zeribe that at the rate we were going, every senator from the southeast was going to taste the Senate presidency. But they were all from the southeast. There was national consensus on that issue. So each time any of them slipped on the legendary banana peel, they looked for a replacement from the southeast. In fact, it got to a point, because I came in the Fifth Senate in 2003, where a first-time senator, against the rules of the Senate, Senator Ken Nnamani, had to assume the Senate presidency. But it wasn't an issue because everybody believed that the circumstances were unusual and that it was still the turn of the Southeast. After President Olusegun Obasanjo, we had President Umaru Yar'Adua. May God bless his soul. And he was from the Northwest. Senator David Mack was Senate President from the North Central. When President Yar'Adua passed on, his Vice President, Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, from the South, continued where he stopped. Goodluck Jonathan's administration was seen as an extension of the administration of President Umaru Yar'Adua. And don't forget the constitutional crisis that we almost got into that necessitated the doctrine of necessity to enable President Goodluck Jonathan assume the mantleship of state. And because of that, because of the very peculiar situation, the country was wobbly politically. It was decided that David Mack should continue because that government was essentially an extension of Umaru Yar'Adua's presidency. So David Mack's case, especially after President Yar'Adua died, was peculiar, was unusual. After President Yar'Adua and Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, we had President Muhammadu Buhari. The Senate presidency remained in the North because what we have always had is if you have the president from the North, the vice president will be from the South, the Senate presidency will be in the North. So if you have a Southern president, you had a Southern Senate president. Now, we had president and vice versa. If you had a Northern president, you had a Northern Senate president. When President Buhari assumed office, against the run of play, to quote you, Dr. Bukola Saraki emerged as Senate president. But he was from the North Central. The North was eligible to produce a Senate president. The only zone that couldn't produce was the Northwest because that's where the president was from. But the Northeast and the North Central were eligible to produce. And then after Dr. Bukola Saraki, we have Dr. Ahmed Lawan from the Northeast. So we are not reinventing the wheel. We started with President Olusegun Obasanjo from the Southwest. We had the Southeast presidents. We have had that history. We have had that precedent. We are not reinventing the wheel. The proper thing to do is to zone it to the Southeast.
All right.
And I use this opportunity
to
just appeal to my Muslim, Northern Muslim brothers who are interested in the leadership of the Senate to recuse themselves from this race in the interest of the unity of this country and in the spirit of Section 14, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking us down history lane. But I'd like to ask you, Senator Ndoma Egba, you have spoken very clearly as to your view that the Senate presidency should be zoned, despite the fact that your party hasn't come out to the position as to whether they would zone it or not. I'd like to ask you, is there a candidate that you're backing? Because if you zone it to the South, there are a number of people who have indicated interest, a number of senators who have indicated interest in the Senate presidency. So if you're looking away from the North, who would you be backing and why?
Section 50 of the Constitution creates the office of the Senate President. And it says the senators shall elect from amongst themselves who shall be Senate President. I'm not a serving senator, so I'm not eligible to vote. But I think my duty is, having been leader of the Senate, first deputy leader and then later on leader. I was deputy leader in the 6th Senate and leader in the 7th Senate. So I was in leadership for 2 out of my 3 terms in the Senate. I know that Senator Osita Izunaso was in the House of Representatives. He was also in the Senate when I was there for 1 term before he left to become a National Organizing Secretary of the APC. And I hear he's returning to the Senate. You also have Senator Ojos Okalu, who was also in the House of Reps at some point. He's been in the Senate. I think this is his 2nd term. He's a principal officer. So both of them are eligible. They are ranking senators and they're eligible. I don't have any particular candidate. But I just believe that we must stick to the principle, or the principles of equity, fairness, and justice. Our brothers from the North, Muslim brothers from the North, should not take it because they can. It is not a question of might. It is a question of justice. It is a question of equity. And each and every one of them has a stake in the survival of this country. If that is the sacrifice they must make to keep this country one, it is not beyond them to make that sacrifice.
Okay, Senator, well, fine. We know where you stand now. In terms of zoning, you think that it should, the person who will lead the National Assembly should come from the South. Are you pushing the same argument for the House of Representatives also? And then, I mean, if I push further and ask you, to be a character witness, you've mentioned Senator Izunaso, you've mentioned Senator Oji Uzokalu, who said, look, it is his turn. Emilokan, after a fashion, to be Senate president. And in fact, the thing should be zoned to his family, should be zoned to his village, Igbere village. I would like you to give, some kind of character witness in terms of the capabilities of these persons as you know them. And then maybe you also include, in that regard, Senator Godswill Akpabio from your zone, South-South, who is also interested. You don't think the South-South should even be considered at all? What do you think?
Well, let me start from the last question. I had said we were not reinventing the wheel. We have been in this situation before. How did we deal with it when we were in this situation? How did we deal with it when President Olusegun Obasanjo from the Southwest was president? All the Senate presidents, many of them at that time, all came from the Southeast. Today we have a president from the Southwest. So let's go back to what we did before. As for character evidence, fortunately, Dr. Abati, we are not in court. And you know, the political space is different from the judicial space. And I'm a politician. Both candidates are very close friends of mine. So I will excuse myself from giving any character reference on any of them.
Okay. So you think Senator Godswill Akpabio should just forget it? You don't even think about it because history.
When we had a Southwest president, we had Senate presidents from the Southeast. There was the question you also asked about the House of Representatives. I believe that the speakership of the House of Representatives, it's my personal opinion, should go to the North, but it should go to a Northern Christian. Because you have a president and a vice president who are Muslims. So for the interest of justice, we should just leave the legislature to the Christians just to balance. You know? Okay. For the Senate president, I am very clear in my mind that he should go to the Southeast.